Welcome to the App in Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast.
For so many mobile app developers, it's an all or nothing battle out there in the App Store.
This App in Top podcast is your mobile app marketing advantage.
Let's get that new app of yours moving to the top.
This is the App in Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast.
And now your host, Michael Bauer.
Welcome to the App in Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast. This podcast is produced by appintop.com. You can find the daily blog at blog.appintop.com and also track us down on Facebook, facebook.com/appintop. And since we tweet and we expect it of you, please follow us on Twitter at appintop_com, appintop_com. Supersonic is the mobile advertising technology platform of choice for the app economy. Developers across the globe use Supersonic cloud-based SDK to serve video and native ads to generate significant revenue. Joining us today, Adam Ben-David, head of publisher operations at Supersonic, to talk about what success means in a business where making revenues via app monetizing is becoming more and then will be more challenging. Adam, thank you so much for taking the time, sir.
Thank you for having me.
What was the driving force behind Supersonic?
So when the company was founded, the two co-founders actually used to be publishers themselves. Gil and Arik were the co-founders, had originally run a company called MetaCafe, which was a very successful, largely European-focused video sharing sort of content platform. So they were sort of the publisher, and they dealt with how to sort of monetize their property. Then in a largely sort of web-based environment. And sort of as mobile grew and that company sort of progressed forward, they really saw the challenges that a publisher faces by being a publisher, especially in terms of, how to maintain and generate significant ad revenue, as a revenue stream for a business, and, all of the technology that needs to go into sort of doing that effectively. And that was kind of the impetus for Supersonic, of course, being much more focused on, the app world, which is where a lot of development and publishers are going, and kind of the tools that those developers would need to sort of face the challenges that they faced in their previous company.
How many apps are you integrating into your system at this point?
Right now, Supersonic works with somewhere in the range of, tens of thousands of developers, close to the 100,000 range. We started out more so as an enterprise-level solution for larger publishers, which had much more different types of applications and more specific needs. And then over the course of the years have really opened up all of those advanced tools that we created, allowing them for sort of the more indie self-serve community to really take advantage of as well.
Which is, I think, fantastic for the indies to also, keep that in mind as far as what their next level is and how to get to and achieve the level of being able to work with a place like Supersonic. What are some of the advertisers? Who are some of the advertisers that you're currently working with?
So our company has always had a strong focus on brand advertising.
Okay.
As we originally started out as a web platform and then moved into mobile, a lot of our focus has been trying to help those big brand advertisers, which also sort of predominantly just bought web and much more traditional forms of media, and trying to understand what's happening in the mobile environment, where users are, that they're spending their time in mobile apps. So Fortune 500 advertisers like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Coke, McDonald's, those types of advertisers that are now over the course of the years, whereas before they were sort of dipping their toes into mobile, trying to figure it out when we're standing on the sideline, seeing where it was going. Now they're really jumping in headlong as they see, look at all the engagement that's happening, and my users, or my audience and customers aren't really watching TV anymore. They're spending all their time on their tablets and playing Clash of Clans, things like that, as well as, of course, the huge amount of just app developers themselves that are trying to find an audience and sort of carve their way. We work with advertisers and the mobile sphere, specifically big and small. If you're one of the top developers or you're just starting out, then you really want to try and find an audience for your app.
Do you find that with that and some of those big names that you mentioned in there between Procter & Gamble, Coke, and so forth, do you find that more companies are sort of jumping into this realm, or are they still? Is there sort of still the hesitancy of staying on the sideline before they quickly jump in?
So I think that for the most part, the mobile app ecosystem, as far as sort of user acquisition and advertising dollars being spent against that is still mostly dominated by app developers themselves. And honestly, it's less around, sort of standing on the sidelines and just kind of seeing what's happening. I think it's more so that when you're looking at a business, and companies that, spend hundreds of millions or, billions of dollars as a net industry to sort of shift all of their business practices, business operations, technology, relationships, from where they are now into a mobile environment, or at least taking more of that into mobile, it's just a slow process. Even if it's something you want to run fast against, if you're, a multinational corporation, it just takes a while for that sort of to migrate. So I think it's more so that it's moving that in direction as fast as it can, just, given what it takes to, steer a multi-billion-dollar ship in a new direction.
So patience still a key word with it all.
Yeah, I mean, if from the developer's perspective, like if you're a new developer now and you're looking at your app and saying, okay, I want to pursue, ad monetization as an alternative or, additional revenue source along IAP, you definitely don't need to sit on the sidelines if you're the publisher. There's tons of advertising dollars being spent out there. And if you also want to acquire users, now is a great time to jump in. But as far as brand advertising and the more traditional advertisers go, it is, sort of that behemoth ship that's kind of slowly riding its way
Gotcha.
In this direction.
Let's talk about things from a developer standpoint here. If you could give me an idea of what, if from your standpoint and from the standpoint of Supersonic, what is possibly one of the biggest mistakes that a developer makes when starting to monetize their app?
I think it's, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I think it's more so a historical kind of precedence that sort of, informs this type of philosophy. Is that generally what we find with a lot of developers that we work with is that when they build an application, they're mostly building it around trying to monetize based on an in-app purchase. So, driving the user towards a point where, they can buy something to help them, advance in the application, or sort of access more premium content. And it's built very strongly around sort of that type of engagement with the user. And when you then want to introduce something new, let's say an alternative method, around advertising, either in a rewarded scenario, which is becoming extremely popular, to use advertising as a rewarded functionality, or even just advertising in general, it's usually not planned from the beginning, right? So you don't sit down and sort of mock up your game and wireframe it and then stick in the parts where you want to put advertising. So what ends up happening is that it's a latter thought, and it's more tangential to sort of the central IAP focus. So it comes off as not fully baked a lot of times. And what happens is the app experience sort of degrades when you do that. And that has all kinds of effects. One, just the perception, how your app looks to a client or a consumer, and what the perception is of the value of the app that you've created. And then the actual engagement in the experience, it might be a little bit wonky. It seems a little bit out of place. And then you get a lot of feedback from the community like, oh, these ads, they're just kind of here. They're sort of in my way. I don't like them in the experience. And then they suffer, and that creates a feedback loop where the developer might feel that, well, it's not really working for me, and then frustration sets in, and it's hard to kind of pull that off. So I think that's changing more so as developers see that there are significant revenue streams to be had from advertising, and they're starting to sit down more from the beginning and think, okay, if I want to use advertising, and I still want to make the best app experience possible, which today is more important than ever in terms of how competitive it's becoming and how quickly you need to sort of iterate on your app experience, that the developers, they really sit down and just it's not even that much more, but just take the time to kind of plan that out from the beginning, are seeing much better success.
It's sort of it's a concept of forethought that I don't think they necessarily forget about, but then go, oh my, this would have been a great advertising opportunity or some sort of monetizing opportunity that we could have gone with if we had just thought about it from the early beginning rather than having to redo and redo.
Exactly. And, a lot of that is it's difficult to build an app. You want to do it fast. There's a lot of things to worry about. And there's only so much time that you can spend. And if you don't have, prior experience, you might be sort of at the onset thinking, wow, this is going to be quite a daunting task. So I'll just kind of stick it in somewhere and that'll be good enough. Instead of trying to, really sort of dive in and invest the time, even though you'll get much greater returns. So it's like in anything.
I was going to say, it's not good enough in essence. And at the end of the day, if you just kind of keep that frame of mind, you're steps ahead of other developers.
Exactly.
Tell me about the most profitable format Supersonic is working with.
So what we provide to our developers is mostly focused around value exchange or engagement advertising, which basically, in simplest forms, is presenting the user with the ability to earn any sort of premium content in your application. If it's a gaming application, you have currency or you have some type of rewards, or if it's a texting or communication application and the users can buy time or minutes or any sort of premium content, and to earn that rather than purchase it through engaging with advertising. And it's most focused on video advertising. That's fastly becoming one of the most predominant methods for advertisers because video is great, and video engagement as a medium is really being led by YouTube, and other content outlets where that's one of the primary ways to engage with the user.
Sure.
As well as just different engagement offers, to try out different services from advertisers or to sign up or sort of take reviews or try out different solutions. So those are the two main drivers for us at the moment and seeing the most significant revenue returns for the developers that we work with.
What's the biggest challenge in that particular format? Is there a big challenge that you guys are seeing right now?
So I think the challenge there relates back to kind of the prior one about just planning it out in your application. So it really pairs well with the freemium model. And I think what a lot of developers are seeing is that you are able to generate significant revenue from IAP. It usually only comes from a small percentage of the user base. And that's for a number of reasons. One, I think with the way free-to-play just sort of applications, not even games in general, just the fact that on the internet, most applications or content that you interact with has been free, has really, educated the market that you should look for content to be free. So a lot of them don't justify why they should pay for something. But for a lot of other users that interengage with those applications, they might not be able to make an in-app purchase. Maybe they don't have the means personally, or they don't have the infrastructure. In certain countries where they are that really facilitate credit card payments. So a lot of users, they probably would, but they just don't have the access to do so in the way maybe a user in the United States does. So the advertising model really allows sort of an alternative sort of payment system to expand and cater more towards the tastes of other users that would like to engage but want to explore different options. And for us, the biggest thing about engaging with that from an app perspective is, again, how to kind of build that into your application. So if, let's say, you have a game and there's sort of a currency that a user can purchase and use to advance in the application, and if, a lot of your users are not able to make an in-app purchase or use their credit card, or maybe just don't see sort of the justification early on in the life cycle of the app, and you want to present to them the ability to sort of earn this through engaging with advertising, you want to present it in a way which is just as compelling as the in-app purchases. Not sort of tacked onto the side, but really front and center, so that they feel like it's part of the core loops of your application, and is really something that's more of a feature that they should engage with, that's going to be valuable to them.
Something that doesn't look like a whoops afterthought kind of a concept.
Exactly.
The world of traffic for ads can get a little cloudy and hard to navigate sometimes. Head of Publisher Operations at Supersonic, Adam Ben David, guides us through that, coming up in seconds here on the App and Top podcast.
You're listening to the App and Top Mobile Marketing Podcast.
This podcast is produced with the support of AdtoApp.com, the SDK of choice for mobile publishers who want to monetize their apps.
With algorithms that double revenue for your mobile app monetization, smart mediation of 20-plus largest advertising platforms, maximum rate per 1,000 impressions, 100% fill rate in 180-plus countries, and
super easy integration and fast payouts. For more information on how to get started, log on to
AdtoApp.com.
This is the App and Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast. I'm Mike Bauer. Supersonic employs cutting-edge machine learning models for real-time bidding, supply auctioning, device-level targeting, and lifetime value prediction. Supersonic works with Fortune 500 brands as well as the world's largest app developers from global offices in the U.S., Europe, and Asia. Adam Ben David, head of publisher operations at Supersonic, has kindly joined us to help us sort of cut our way through, make our way through the sometimes cloudy world of traffic for ads. Adam, in regards to different formats and different audiences, do you find that there is a single type of monetization, the CPM, CPI, CPC, that's better to use for maximizing revenues? Or do you have to consider each format so distinctly?
So I think that a lot of it depends on the type of application that you've created and the type of experience that you want to cater to. And with that in mind, there are lots of different choices that work, and a lot of different choices that, can generate money. But at the same time, a lot of people will just say, yeah, there's lots of different kinds and you should sort of experiment and try out these ones and figure out what works, which isn't that helpful, a lot of times for a developer when he's trying to figure out what to do and he doesn't have a lot of time to test. And if you look at where the money is going from the advertiser perspective, like what do advertisers want to buy more of, then that's a really great way to inform yourself on what you should use as an ad format if you are a developer.
Do you from your perspective, what you guys see in the advertisers that you work with, what do you see being the predominant form?
So what we see in terms of providing the advertisers the best value, and again, what they end up buying most because of that, is mostly focused around video.
Okay.
As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, video is really sort of culturally becoming one of the biggest ways that people consume media in general, again, led by YouTube and things like TED Talks. And people spend more time looking for video content rather than reading, either articles or books in that sense even. So the advertising formats which power video inside of the application are the most conducive to sort of providing the user an experience that they're used to getting basically everywhere else, when they're looking for other things. So when they find it in your application, they're already sort of aligned to that type of experience. And specifically with applications mostly dominated or sort of driven by games in particular, but because of the success of the free-to-pay model, moving into dating applications and utility applications, rewarded video specifically, which is allowing your user to engage with video content and earn some type of premium content from your application, is really driving the most significant revenue from our publisher base. So I would say that if you are a developer, that should be the number one content or ad unit type that you look at, which can be applied to any type of application that you have. Again, you don't need to be a game developer to take advantage of that. And you will see that the most amount of money or sort of pools of advertising dollars that you can tap into are fast sort of moving in that direction.
Is the main concern from the publisher standpoint, is it the fear of the outflow of users because the ads integrated to the app? Would you say that that's one of the bigger concerns?
I think that the main concern for a developer, and rightly so, is typically around just user experience. Maybe not so much about the user, say, leaving the application as a first point of concern about the user experience, but just what is the overall experience going to be like? Is the video going to be good quality? Is it going to be relevant content? Is it just going to freak them out if they see something which is totally ajar from what the application is?
Right.
And then, yes, to use it as well, are they going to be out of my application? Are they going to be in it? What happens? And the technology has come a long way. So in mobile video, it's mostly pre-cached campaigns, which means that the ads are downloaded and pre-prepped for the user so that when they want to watch a video, it just instantly plays back and there's no buffering, which is wholly unique from video anywhere else. Video on the web, even YouTube, it has to buffer. You can't pre-download. It's got to stream. So it creates an amazing video experience for users on a mobile device. And because of the amount of advertising sort of dollars that have moved into that and the amount of advertisers, the different ad networks are really able to cater the right content to what the user will be interested in to create an enhancement to the app experience and add content that goes with that. And it's played within the app, so the user doesn't need to navigate outside, and they can just immediately return to the app experience when they're done. So it's pretty seamless.
He is Adam Ben-David, the head of publisher operations at Supersonic. So I'm going to ask you for some advice here, and I'd like you to see if you can pull together maybe a couple of pieces of advice, maybe even the top 3 tips that publishers can use for earning money and still keeping users.
So Right away, I would say that one, if you're not considering advertising as an alternative revenue source for your application, then you definitely should.
Yeah.
Obviously, I work for an advertising revenue company, so of course I'm going to say that. But I'm saying it based on the success that our company has seen in terms of how rapidly we've grown, and success we've been able to bring based on the success that our developers have. So, our business model is based on mutual success with the developer. So the more revenue that we generate for our clients, the more revenue that Supersonic can make. So because we've been able to grow so fast, it's because we've been able to grow the revenue and generate so much for our clients. So the method really is working. So one, I would say that from the onset, you should recognize that the application that you're building, whether it's a gaming application or a utility or communication, really is a service to your clients. And your clients have different tastes and different needs. So some clients will want to just spend money and pay for it directly, and other clients will not for various reasons. So you should include those users rather than sort of alienate them by only presenting one option, which maybe it's an option that they don't want to engage in or that they're not able to engage in. So by including more options for your clients, you're enhancing your application's utility value and creating a better experience, and one that is extremely lucrative because of the amount of money that's being spent into that. Mm-hmm. And then the second tip is to sit down and really understand, okay, if this is something that I want to do, how best am I going to present that? And there are tons of great examples that are out there. Publishers that we work with like EA and the PopCap Studio, who've made great games like Plants vs. Zombies or Peggle Blast, that are really understanding, how to kind of integrate this into a more cohesive way where it feels more part of the user experience from the beginning, and that really creates a good engagement. So I would say sort of one, definitely consider alternative monetization or sort of access options for users, advertising being a really strong one. Two, sort of build it in from the beginning. And three, really focus on what you're providing to the user. So as I mentioned earlier, rewarded video is really becoming the main revenue driver as far as advertising formats go for a lot of our developers. And a lot of that is contingent on finding what to reward the user. Some developers might make the mistake where they would say, okay, the in-app purchase is really sacred for me, and that's what I want to focus on more. So if I'm willing to give the user, let's say, X amount of some premium content for making an in-app purchase, well, then I'm going to give them, half of that for engaging with advertising. And what happens is that you create sort of a disparity between, the two sources, and again, the two different types of users that might use one of those two different means. So we've seen a lot of developers that will launch with some of these ad formats, and it's not that great in the beginning, and they're sitting there thinking, why is it not working? Mm-hmm. How come I'm not generating the revenue that I want? But they haven't really, given the user something which is worth or justifies kind of their interaction with that. And with a couple small tweaks and testing it out, suddenly it unlocks, and all of their users are really more engaged, and they're driving a lot more revenue. So really thinking about the reward that you want to give, and think about it from a user perspective. You're asking them to engage with video content. Are you really giving them something which is worth their time?
Well, is there a level of balance in there too? I don't know what sort of the numbers are showing for Supersonic, but I mean, how frequently should you allow your users to see the ads without fear of them leaving? You want to keep that balance in there. You want to make sure that you're giving them enough for what they're going to click on and seeing and what they're watching, and yet at the same time, you don't want to run them away. Is there a balance in there somewhere?
Yeah, definitely. And certainly it depends in that respect on the type of ad units that you're using. So if you're using more display type advertising like banners or sort of full screen pop-up ads, mm-hmm. then that's sort of a forced engagement, right? Where you're deciding to present that to the user, right, sort of irrespective of if they want to. So on that side, definitely you need to find the right balance. Most users will accept that free applications are driven by advertising. So they won't, fly at the first sight of an ad. But if they feel that it's too much, then they would sort of drop out. And the rule of thumb there is, typically applications are built around core loops of activity, right? If it's a game, maybe it's playing levels, or if it's a communication app, it's about, creating and sending sort of content and messages to your friends or mm-hmm. family. And usually the rule of thumb there is that you want to be able to sort of engage in the core loops at least 3 or 4 times before an ad will pop into the experience. If it's, every time you take an action, an ad pops up afterwards, you're going to get kind of tired.
Yeah.
But if you're able to sort of move through it, then it works. Now, on the engagement side of the coin or the house is that if you're providing the option for the user to, let's say, earn more sort of long distance minutes in your communication application for watching videos, then you can be much more open because the user is the one dictating sort of the level of engagement or the level of consumption, right? At that point, you're just saying, hey, there's this feature where you can watch videos and you're going to get more long distance minutes or you're going to get more coins. And at that point, the opposite is kind of true. You don't really want to necessarily force, limit the user because maybe they're willing and they want to engage and earn, lots of that. So on the opposite side, you kind of want to let them decide how much they want to consume.
You don't want to necessarily thrust too much on them. You give them the opportunity and see what they want to do with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We're going to talk what to do and what to avoid doing when trying to monetize with the head of publisher operations at Supersonic, Adam Ben David, when we return in moments here on the App and Top podcast.
You're listening to the App and Top Mobile Marketing Podcast.
This podcast is produced with the support of AdtoApp.com, the SDK of choice for mobile publishers who want to monetize their apps.
With algorithms that double revenue for your mobile app monetization, smart mediation of 20-plus largest advertising platforms, maximum rate per 1,000 impressions, 100% fill rate in 180-plus countries, and
super easy integration and fast payouts. For more information on how to get started, log on to
AdtoApp.com.
This indeed is the App and Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast. I'm Michael Bauer, your host. We would love to hear from you, so please send us your comments via Facebook at facebook.com/appandtop or tweet us your questions, comments, and thoughts at appandtop_com, appandtop_com. Supersonic is the mobile advertising technology platform of choice for the app economy. We're joined by Adam Ben David, head of publisher operations at Supersonic. He's here to lend insight, the best way to monetize your app. So, Adam, publishers often launch 2 versions of the app. The first one's free, but has limited functionality and some ads inside, while the second is paid, ads-free, and has all the content. How viable is that strategy?
So I think that strategy was, in my opinion, kind of sort of an earlier version of what a lot of developers were doing. I think most developers at this point, or sort of the market in general, has proven that the freemium model, which is the application itself is free and you get access to everything, but you can enhance your experience with premium features or sort of more robust ways to interact with it, has really become sort of the standard. So most of the developers that we work with don't necessarily pursue that model. Now, they might pursue what's sort of the future hybrid of that model, which is, it is a free app. There's only one and you can download it. And there is advertising from the beginning, but you can pay to turn off the advertising completely. I think that's sort of replaced the, paid sort of premium app versus the free sort of ad-powered app, where it's kind of moved in that direction. And I think a lot of that is from necessity, right? When you have amazing applications coming out from really large developers that are free and are powered by the in-app purchase model, then, even if you have a premium version of your game, which only costs 99 cents, but is completely ad-free and has a lot more functionality, that's a harder draw for users because they're saying, well, I get that your game has all this cool stuff that I could get, but there's other games which have all this cool stuff I could get as well, and they don't have a 99-cent version. I would say that for most developers, premium games definitely still work, and there are a lot of developers that make premium games, but it's a tough market to kind of compete into, and depending on sort of what your strategy is, if you're going to make a premium game, it's got to be really amazing at this point, and studios like Square Enix are still making Final Fantasy games, and those are premium, and those do really well. But there's a lot of brand powerhouse behind that, and a lot of content in those applications. So unless your game really can sort of stand on its own 2 legs, it's probably better distribution-wise to start out as a freemium game and kind of build around that sort of economy style. And then inside of that, what I mentioned earlier, the sort of, being able to pay to turn off the ads, that's still a viable option. And I think a lot of developers are seeing a lot of success with that. But now sort of the new formats of engagement advertising, where you want to include advertising as a feature, but allow the user to interact with that in order to unlock premium content, is sort of the next iteration that's really sort of taken over the last couple of years.
Of all of those options, and I kind of dig the evolution of how that's changed and how you've seen that happen. Which one do you think is probably the most profitable? Will it be the premium app, or do you think it will be this ability to sort of pay to turn off and also access, power-ups, whatever the case may be?
I think it's an interesting question, and I think that I think a lot of developers still think about this question and sort of wonder. It's kind of hard to A/B test that, right? You can't go back in time and release the same app as premium and see, would I have made more money? And I think sometimes developers feel that, I did make a mistake. Freemium sort of maybe wasn't the way to go. If I had made $1 from every user rather than, just maybe tens of dollars from a smaller group might have been more profitable. But at a certain point, as sort of the market really shifts and a lot of the consumer sort of habits and behaviors are informed, some of those things are just sort of left to the past. You just sort of need to kind of go where the ship is going. And there's definitely a lot of call-outs. You can still make sort of premium applications and do really well. It will be hard to know which will be more or less profitable. But I think that when you look at it from the distribution standpoint rather than from a revenue standpoint, how do I put, the experience that I've created in the most hands possible and really make some global phenomenon where I have millions of people interacting, which is also an important metric for success just beyond revenue itself. Creating something which is really powerful and millions of people play with it, then it's a hands down, obviously free is the way to go. As I mentioned earlier, that's what my generation, certainly, and generations past me, that's kind of the expectation. That's how you access things on the internet. Everything is free, and at that point you sort of pay for premium content. So I think that's the only really meaningful way to make a hugely popular app in terms of just distribution wise.
He is Adam Ben-David, head of publisher operations at Supersonic. You mentioned earlier, it's kind of been a theme that we've been talking about sort of installing the mind frame and then eventually making that work for the publishing level as well. But thinking of the monetization, advertising of whatever your app is, with that, should the publisher develop a different monetization strategy for each region if we're talking about a global monetization on some level? Like for example, what would be the main differences between monetization in the US as opposed to Asia?
I think it's a great question, and I think that it's a question that a lot of developers are asking themselves, and it's a hard one to try and solve for multiple reasons. I mean, one, a lot of developers are really just trying to work on gaining users to begin with and retaining them in general. And you've got to sort of pick and choose what you can spend your time on, where your battles are. And in terms of creating sort of more curated content experiences for users based on sort of where they are in the world and what, kind of what their culture informs, I think that localization is probably the first thing that people think about, which is just, I should localize the content of my application so that it feels more native to the user there. That's probably the first way to start. But even that can be, or something like that, it can have a high barrier to entry for a developer who wants to do that. Do they have the resources? Can they curate 2 different types of applications, versions based on that? Do they have the team to support that? Do they have the understanding of how to localize? So it can be a challenge even if you would want to do it. Now, I would say that there can be a lot of success in trying to sort of streamline or customize the experience more for users. It's definitely on the monetization side. A lot of it can be more about the users themselves rather than just where they are, physically located in the world, maybe culturally. And if you look at it from that perspective, trying to say, okay, what are the types of users that I have? I might have one type of user in the US and I have that same type of user in the UK or in Asia, as you said. And then I have another type of user that also happen to be in, 5 different geos. So if I can identify my users based on what type of user they are in terms of how they engage with my app, then I can create multiple tracks or multiple flows that cater to both of those. So whereas if I want to take the overall experience, maybe localize that or present content which is more culturally meaningful to a user, and that will just create a better experience when it comes to monetization. Generally, even if people are in different cultures or in different parts of the world, they probably more often fall into certain types of bundles, just sort of types of people that they are. And then you can create tracks around that. And that makes sure that you try and look at things from a more global perspective so that you get a lot of scale and reusability out of the techniques that you implement. So you're not just putting something in your app to, monetize one set of users for one country, but you've now put in something which can monetize that set of users, but in every country that they come from.
All right, I'm going to ask you here to look deep into your crystal ball app, Adam, and I want you to tell me, because as you know, mediation services are emerging now along the old school offer walls. Everything changes quickly. What do you think about the future of monetizing apps? What does the world of monetizing apps look like in the next 3, 5, 10 years?
Well, if I could go 10 years out, then I would be really lucky. So
good point.
I don't think I'm going to
maybe we'll limit it to
out.
5. We'll shut it down at 5 and say the rest is just off the table right now.
For sure. I think that for the most part, what's going to be more interesting about the monetization is going to first be led more so on the way that the apps themselves are going to evolve. So from advertising and sort of the world that I play in, video is going to continue to be sort of the large dominating factor for the next couple of years. Again, just based off of outside of the app economy itself, how are users consuming content and how are advertisers able to engage with users that they want. So that's going to continue to grow. And I think that from the app perspective, what I see with a lot of successful app developers is the process of trying to make app ecosystems inside of that world. So for example, if we look at King, they have the Saga series with a lot of titles that sort of pair themselves, Candy Crush Saga, Bubble Witch Saga, and all the different Saga games. And a lot of other developers are trying to do the same thing, which is sort of, within the vast world of all of the millions of games that are out there, this is sort of like Kingland, or this is Rovio Land, or this is Zynga Land. And trying to create an ecosystem of apps that have that sort of brand image and sort of that brand quality that, King has really created a brand and a type of experience that you get when you go to King. It's like if you want to shop at Nordstrom versus shopping at Ross maybe, or shopping at Target. And trying to sort of protect the users because it's, hard to acquire users and hard to maintain them. And once you sort of reach the level of that critical mass, you can sort of build this sort of sphere of influence almost, if you want to think about it that way, where you're creating many different applications that users are engaging with and passing them around. I think that that's what we see as being the strategy of a lot of the bigger developers that we work with. And that was only possible really in maybe the last year or so, because in the beginning, besides breakout games like Rovio and Angry Birds, which just, dominated for such a long time as like the seminal game that everyone played, it was really hard to maintain a really dedicated sort of large user base. But a lot of publishers are able to do that now. And since they don't have to worry, or sort of lose sleep overnight, like, guys, we're losing users, every single day. We need to hold on to them. Once they sort of have this large dedicated user base, they can sort of build on top of that and build these ecosystems and try and create more so these spheres of influence. And I think that is working successfully for a lot of top developers. And that's where a lot of publishers are sort of trying to go once they sort of have their hit. And I'm not sure exactly where that's going to take it or how that's going to evolve or what that's going to look like. But I think that that's sort of the dominant factor for the big developers, or even the mid-sized ones. You don't need to be King or Supercell. But that's really going to allow them to sort of build this user economy where they are able to generate a lot of different types of content and different types of experience and expose that to the communities that they've built, and then continue to monetize in that fashion. And inside of that, as the more developers think of advertising as a feature inside of their application, which enhances the quality of the experience for their users, then video is going to be the large one around that. There's obviously a big buzz around native and trying to sort of parrot and feeds, which are built-in applications, are really popular right now. If your application is a content feed and you can stick native advertising inside of that, that's working really well. And I think pairing video as a way for users to explore different types of content inside of that sort of world that you're creating for them for the next couple of years is going to be the dominant model.
Who do you think out of the following three is going to be the one leading the way with the next big thing, whatever that is, in regards to the monetization? Will it be the developers? Will it be the advertisers? Or will it be somebody like Supersonic that finds that combination between the two to find the next big thing?
It's a good question. I think that depending on where the most innovative sort of enhancement comes from, then that might be sort of the one that leads it. I mean, certainly, I think for the most part that a lot of it will really be led by the developers that really test out different models, advance different types of user experiences, and sort of prep the consumer market on sort of what you should expect from apps in general and what type of experiences you're going to have. And so they're, on that sense, they're usually sort of leading the way in terms of like what a mobile experience is going to be like. I would say that companies like Supersonic and ourselves in the middle are trying to sort of merge those things together to take advertising, which, maybe is often sort of slower moving sort of animal that wants to kind of play in really the leading cutting edge of how dynamic mobile development is, and we'll sort of bridge those two together. So usually we see ourselves as kind of there's the sort of the fast racing horse out there, which is the mobile developers that are just trying, experimenting new things all the time and changing the ecosystem around them. And ourselves is kind of the bridge that's really helping the advertising community sort of stay current and keep up and advance to the level where app developers are.
Well, officially, Adam, for the past 40 minutes, you've explained the formats that Supersonic is working with. You've given our publishers tips for earning money, still keeping their users, and you've managed to give us a perspective on the future of monetizing apps. And in addition to that, Adam, just between you and I, you came up with a great name for my nephew's rock band. I think Spheres of Influence is a great name for a rock band. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. I don't know if they're going to sign a contract, but I think it's a great name nonetheless.
Well, I already trademarked it, so it's a good thing.
Damn it. I'm going to have to come up with something outside of Spheres, perhaps I'll have to come up with. But Adam, in any case, thank you so much for your time. You're officially free to go. And to all of you, thank you very much for listening. This has been the App and Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast. Make sure you visit our daily blog, blog.appandtop.com, where you can find all this great information and much, much more every single day. Until next time, I'm Mike Bauer. See ya.
The App and Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast is produced by
AdtoApp.com.